Yo, it's been a while since we've had a kind of side episode like this, but it is important to have one every now and again just to keep everyone up to date and on the same page when it comes to the deck. So this video is going to have a bit more of a competitive narrative as we discuss the metagame and how good our deck actually is. Before we can have any valid input on this topic, we of course need to actually playtest the deck in a competitive environment. So on the sidelines over like the past month, I've been competing in a 200-man tournament with the completed current version of our deck. So with all the cards we're currently going for. We're going to be going through all the matchups and the gameplay in this video as well, and as an attempt to improve as a player, we will, analyze our gameplay, look for our mistakes, and see what we could have done better. So this is the list that I entered with, and as you can see, it's not too far off our current build at all. The side deck is pretty much the exact same. The only differences are that I have the third Called by the Grave in here, and we have the 3 Reclusia and 3 Maximus that I am yet to get in the series, and the Gravedigger's Trap Hole as well, of course. We're in a weird kind of spot when it comes to our deck. As a list that we've basically built from the ground up, especially as a 46 card variant, there's very, very limited resources and discussions out there for optimizing the build. I think we are very close to a optimized version, but there are probably still a couple of changes needed made. I don't know, it's been a really fun additional challenge to the From Scratch series, having to do everything ourselves. We will discuss the possible changes I want to make to the deck towards the end, but for now, let's get into that tournament competitive gameplay. Alright, so for round 1 we ended up getting paired against a fellow YouTuber, Bear. You should go check him out, he makes some of the coolest thumbnails I've ever seen. But yeah, unfortunately we lost the rock, paper, scissors and we were made to go second, obviously with no hand traps in the deck. Very unsurprisingly, the first card we see in the entire tournament is of course a Jet Synchron, and you also seen a Mardell go to the graveyard as well, so we're up against Synchro Generators. Instead of going for the standard Savage Herald, he instead makes Librarian and draws about 4 cards in total. Eventually ending on a board of Librarian, Savage, Generator Boss Stage, the Field Spell, and 4 Unknown Back Row. So of course the Field Spell is going to trigger in my draw phase and summon Har from the deck. Har is an incredibly good card. When I add a card from my deck to my hand, it forces me to discard one, and it's got an Omni Negate on top of that with Destruction. Is it possible for us to play through this and break the board? There's literally like a million different lines of play with this hand, and I believe if you played it correctly, you could actually break this board and win the game. Hell, I didn't even play it correctly and I was almost still able to combo through 4 interruptions. It was the 5th interruption that stopped me. The biggest misplay in this game was definitely activating the Signet Mining. There was 100% no reason for me to do that, and it cost me 2 cards. So yeah, I normal summon the Skippy and go into Magius. Our Skippy gets called by, so I don't get a search for Parallel Exceed. I then chain block the Magius with Reclusia, attempting to pop his Savage, obviously forcing out a negate. He negates and destroys with his Har, and I get a search for Arborea. Now I use Draco, attempting to add back the Maximus, which gets met with a second Called by the Grave, link into Striker Dragon, and I go Chainlink 1 Striker Dragon, Chainlink 2 Noctovision. Even if I had just done this the other way round, it could have changed the result, having that extra body and a draw as well for a potential extender. Instead, he just negates the summon effect of Noctovision with Savage, and I'm left with Arborea, which does get me to a Halki Fibrax, and we get met with an Ash. Now his final back row is an Impermanence, however if I had the Noctovision on board we could make Boral Sword, draw into hopefully an extender, and then attack to clear his board. He would probably imperm the Boral Sword to protect one of his monsters, allowing us to then use our extender, make LP in main phase 2 and pop off from there, potentially winning the game. So I definitely could have played it a little bit better, but going into game 2 I literally opened one of the best hands you could possibly open in this deck. Skippy and Arborea gets us to a Halki Fibrax with Parallel Exceed, making us Rafflesia, but our Halki Fibrax does get met with an Impermanence, although it literally does nothing to us with this hand, unlike most decks where if you stop the Halki Fibrax then you're kind of stopping their whole combo. With Rafflesia now protecting us from any further hand traps, we now have nothing to worry about, and we continue playing until we get to our full board of Union Carrier, Rafflesia, Spheres, Savage, Harbinger, and a set Called by the Grave. Union Carrier of course giving us the extra deck lock as well, and he doesn't even try to play through it. Game 3. Game 3 was like Game 1 but 10 times worse. Unfortunately, I don't see any side deck options and have no interruptions, and his board is realistically literally impossible to break. There's your comment challenge. How do you break this board outside of like Sphere Mode and Triple Lightning Storm? So yeah, unfortunately we start the tournament on a loss, but we definitely come back swinging. Round 2 we're up against Blind Second Cyber Dragons, and this time not only does our Needle Fiber get impermanenced, our LP also gets impermanenced, yet we're still able to end on Spheres, Harbinger, Harbinger, and Savage. Going straight to the battle phase, he forces out our Savage with an evenly matched, then in min phase 2 he goes Galaxy Soldier for Cyber Dragon Hurts. After getting both Galaxy Soldiers on the board, he's left with just one card, which is Cyber Repair Plant. Obviously we just negate that with Harbinger, and then we can just bounce whatever rank 5 he makes with spheres, so he quickly scoops them up. Game 2 we're going first once again, and we do hard open the Exceed, getting Rafflesia out as summon 5, and therefore we are protected from the Nibiru. With no interruptions we get to our full 5-piece board, however on his turn, he drops a Dark Ruler no more. Round 3 we ended up winning Rock Paper Scissors against Guru thankfully, and we took the match 2-1. This was actually a feature match and it's on Sir Eminon's channel, commentated by Sir Eminon himself and MBT, so if you want to go check that out, the link will of course be in the description. Now climbing back towards the top tables and going into round 4, we're going to see a lot of meta. In fact, the next 4 matches were all Synchro Eldritch or Adamancipators. Thankfully, we do win Rock Paper Scissors in this one and are going first for game 1, but the reason that Synchro Eldritch is such a good deck is because it can go first and second with ease. Because its main engines are so consistent, concise, and recursive, it has a lot of space to run hand traps, and therefore going second, you can just stop your opponent. As you can see here, my Striker Dragon gets Veilered, but that really doesn't affect us at all. It only prevents us from getting Boot Sector Launch, which we don't actually need until the next turn. Getting Rafflesia on the board, we then use Arborea to get to Hulky Fibrax and summon Rocket Synchron from the deck, where we get met with a Nibiru as well. Because we have Rafflesia on the board, we can just chain its effect to Nibiru and negate it with the Gravedigger's Trap Hole. It should have been used when the second Exceed hit the board before Rafflesia gets summoned, although because we have World Legacy Guard Dragon and Draco in hand, we would still be able to play through it anyway. We then see a second effect Veiler come down on the LP effect, so here's where I use the Called by the Grave and continue to pop off, ending on a board of Spheres, Savage, Union Carrier, and the extra deck lock, as well as Rafflesia, but with no other targets left in the deck, she's just a 2-5 booty. With no access to the combo plays and staring down a Savage with multiple negates, he just scoops him up. Going second in game 2, we do see the Impermanence, so we are able to completely stop the Synchro half of the deck by dropping that on the Hulky Fibrax. From there he pushes out some very minimal Eldritch plays. He ends on a Golden Lord plus 1 back row as well, and we draw into Boot Sector Launch, which is very unfortunate because with this hand it relies heavily on the normal summon, so there's really not much else I can do at all when he shotguns the Conquistador on my summon of Skippy. Because the Eldritch deck plays multiple copies of Hulky Fibrax, he's able to return to his combo in the next turn and OTK. Game 3, our hand is a lot more generous, although we do get impermed on the second effect of Parallel Exceed, so I was kind of expecting a Nibiru to come down afterwards, but no, imperm was the only interruption he had. So from there we do of course continue our combos, getting to a board of Spheres, Harbinger, and Savage, with the Union Carrier giving us the extra deck lock as well. He starts his turn off with an Eldeland, and because the activation of the card isn't once per turn, I wait until he pays the cost for the effect before sucking it up with Harbinger. He then attempts to force out the Savage with a Golden Lord effect in hand, however, I do have a set Called by the Grave, which seals the deal, and he scoops him up. Round 5, surprise surprise, we're up against another Synchro Eldritch, and we are going first again. Our hand isn't amazing in terms of extenders, so when he Veilers the Magius and then Veilers the Hulky Fibrax as well, we're forced to pass on a Gravedigger's Trap Hole. At first I thought I was going to be able to use it on the effect of Jet Synchron to prevent him going into his full combo, however, he does get to the Golden Lord and forces it out first. From there he goes into the Synchro plays, and then he doesn't actually OTK, but I do scoop them up anyway because there's no way we can play through his board. Game 2 going first, I do start off with the Foolish Burial just to bait out any lingering foreheads, but he has no response and allows it to go through. From there the correct play would be to normal summon Arborea and go into Magius, however I go with the Skippy instead, which is a huge misplay because it loses to Imperm or Veiler. It does however net me an extra Exceed to discard for Brotar later on, so I guess you could say I got greedy and high risk, high reward, blah blah blah. Rafflesia comes down as summon number 5 and he drops an Ash Blossom on the Striker Dragon. Once again, Boot Sector Launch really isn't necessary for our combo because if we absolutely need to, we can summon Tracer from hand off of Saryuja. So instead of negating the Ash with Rafflesia, I keep her for a more impactful hand trap, for example the Nibiru he drops 2 minutes later. Game 3 we're going second. After setting a Sanguine off the end phase Conquistador, he ends on a token and 2 additional back row. Drawing into Quick Launch, he then fires off a Sanguine in the standby phase, putting Golden Lord on the field. Quick Launch literally couldn't have been a better draw, because now when he shotguns his Conquistador on my normal summon, I can still continue to play by getting a tuner on the board. With Draco in hand as well, this gives us easy access to the Guard Dragon plays, allowing us to get to a Saryuja where we draw into a Levianeer. His final back row is very likely to be a Hequaro, because if it was a Golden Lands Forever, he would have just used it on Halki Fibrax. But just to be safe, I do blow it up with the Levianeer along with the Golden Lord, potentially putting us into OTK range. From there, I summon the Maximus, link Brotar into Pisty, and vomit everything onto the board, making a Boral Sword and a Borreload Savage. This actually fell just short of 8,000 damage, so what I should have done was made Romulus before the Boral Sword, getting me Dragon Ravine, which I could then pop with Tracer for the extra damage. Thankfully, this doesn't actually change anything, because Savage just negates the Hequaro in the end phase and then negates his effect on his turn, leaving him with basically nothing, so he scoops. Round 6, we have our first Rocks match, and we win the Rock Paper Scissors, which is huge because none of our decks typically run hand traps. Thanks to this, I'm free to combo and end on the board of Spheres, Rafflesia, Harbinger, and Savage. I think I was one extender short of getting to the Union Carrier, unfortunately. We do swiftly take game 1 because my opponent's Analyzer whiffs, and in the battle phase, they forget that Hope Harbinger's attack redirection isn't once per turn. Game 2, going second, I didn't think this was possible, but Adamancipators Set 3, pass. I start with the Draco into Magius, triggering Exceed, getting Rafflesia out as summon number 5, but he imperms our Exceed on the board. So unfortunately, after getting out a lot of resources, we do get Nibiru'd. No big deal, we do of course still have plays, that's what Link Spider is for. However, when we link the token into Link Spider, he flips a pointer. I also should have got a search for a rocket off of Abzerarter going to the grave, but I totally forgot about that unfortunately, and he rips Arborea from our hand, so we might be in a little bit of trouble. Summoning Collapse Serpent, I then link into Striker Dragon, getting a search for both Wyver Burster and Boot Sector Launch. Then, using the second effect of Striker Dragon, I pop it to then add Tracer to my hand, which I can summon off Boot Sector Launch, getting us to Halki Fibrax, and therefore Guard Dragon plays. This gets us the Boral Sword and Borreload Savage, successfully OTKing through Imperm, Nibiru, and a pointer of the Red Lotus. That's just crazy to me. In round 7, we have another Synchro Eldritch, and unfortunately we do lose the die roll, and we're going second with no interruption. He makes his way to your typical Synchro Eldritch board, so a Savage Herald and 3 back row, 2 of which he sets during the end phase, therefore we know what they are, and they are Sanguine and Eldlixir of White Destiny, so they both summon a Golden Lord. I start off with Sign-Out-Mining to bait the Savage, and then I have Called by the Grave in hand for Herald when it tributes for cost. So with the negates out of the way, we make our way to a Saryuja and draw into a Reclusia. Keeping the Quick Launch and Collapse Serpent as well, I potentially throw the game by activating Reclusia to pop the Savage. What I should have done was pop the Unknown back row, because Savage at this point was literally just a vanilla body. So now when I climb my way to a Boral Sword and the Borreload Savage, a Conquistador gets flipped and ends up popping the Boral Sword, essentially costing us the game. I did manage to clear his entire board and end on a Spheres and a Savage, but it just wasn't enough, especially with no follow-up on the next turn. So sadly, we do take the L for game 1. Game 2, we open up a little bit of an awkward hand, although I do make the stupid play of normal summoning Skipper instead of Maximus, so an Imperm ends my turn. I'm so used to people not knowing how to play against my deck that I just sort of expected them not to negate Skippy. It's not even like there was a reason to normal Skippy anyway, because I already have the Exceed in hand, so it's literally gaining me a useless card. So yeah, I did kind of throw that one. However, he did have a second Impermanence and a Nibiru in his hand anyway, so it was very unlikely that I would win in the end. Bringing us to round 8, the final round of Swiss, and unfortunately it's cutting to top 16 and not top 32, so this is literally a bubble match, winning the Rock Paper Scissors and opening a very, very good hand. We're up against Ilar playing Unchained, and honestly he's probably one of the best Unchained players I've ever seen. Not that there's really much competition out there for that spot, but yes, very, very good player. He has 0 interruptions, so we're able to play through to our full 5-piece board, including a hand rip from Levianeer, so I'm so confident that we've got this in the bag. Well, shit. If this was literally any other matchup, any meta matchup, this is a game-winning board turn 1. He is unfortunately able to dance around everything with Abominable Unchained Soul popping the Harbinger, and there's just nothing I can do. I have no follow-up. Dark Ruler No More is in fact a very good card. Game 2, suffering PTSD from the trauma that was that Dark Ruler No More, I actually choose to go second, kind of disrespecting the deck because I haven't really seen it play with the addition of Sarama and Abominable Unchained Soul, which really does quite a lot for the deck. Our hand is actually pure trash going second. It would be playable going first, so I should have just went first. The only reason I didn't is because I didn't want a repeat of game 1. That in itself is just kind of flawed logic though, because the chances of him opening Dark Ruler No More is literally about 40%, so I'm more likely to just win the game by making my board again. It's also worth noting that for going second, I sided out my third copy of Parallel Exceed and still somehow managed to open both copies. So all in all, a mix of bad plays and bad luck leading to a swift 2-0 defeat, which was well deserved. Like I said, he is a really good player, but sadly, in the end, none of us made it to top 16. I don't think his tiebreakers were that great, so he ended up in 26th place, whereas I was at the top of the X3 bracket with some pretty good tiebreakers, so I came in 30th place. So an honorary top 32 to add to the belt, but the main point was just to test the deck against the meta, and we have learned a lot after this tournament. So let's go talk about that, shall we? So I think we have two separate but relevant topics to get into here. The first one being, is our deck a meta contender and actually competitively viable? And the second topic being, which build of Dragon Link is actually the best, most competitive build? I think that it's fair to say that if we can incorporate a lineup of hand traps into the deck, therefore relying less on the die roll for game 1, we could definitely have a very competitive deck on our hands. We've seen on multiple occasions that the deck can perform through a variety of hand traps and still build a board. Couple that with the fact that at least in our version, there's really no one true choke point. It's literally a guessing game depending on the hand where to interrupt the deck. Like, you can imperm Halki Fibrax and I can still make full board, or you could stop the LP and I could still get to a full board. I mean, the fact that there are other Dragon Link builds out there that do have more prominent choke points, it kind of warps the opponent's mindset in our favor because they feel like they have to hit a certain card when it's not as important to our build. In the grand scheme of things though, I would say that any Dragon Link variant is just a less good Adamancipator deck. Secret Slayers is of course currently at the forefront of the meta right now and therefore is quite likely to get weakened on the September ban list. Once that happens and they do something to Synchro Eldritch as well, we might actually have a tier 1 deck on our hands. The format will obviously be very different by then because we will have Dragoon and Dragma in the TCG, so we'll see what happens, but I am very confident for the future. Now moving on to the comparison of Dragon Link builds, namely our CRUSADIA build versus Xiangping Su's 60 card build. I was originally under the impression that the Chaos version was just inherently better. A video that's worth watching if you are interested is a video that Tombox very recently uploaded, and it's an hour-long interview with Xiangping Su himself. In this video they speak about the deck, different tech options and combo lines, and it's all very interesting. However, I now think that the deck is actually a lot more fragile than ours, because if you hit it on the Link Cross or the Halki Fibrax, it really hurts, especially when it doesn't have any built-in way to protect itself against Nibiru. Yes, there are some situations where you have the correct extenders to play through it and still make somewhat of a board, but the end pieces are so limited that you'll probably just be ending on like a Savage by itself. The end goal of the deck is to make an Apollousa plus VFD and then the Savage, but the Apollousa and the VFD just require so much resources that if you do stop it, then it's really going to struggle to get there. I will say that to its benefit, VFD really doesn't care about Dark Ruler No More compared to our deck, but then what if VFD and or even Link Cross gets hit on the ban list? All things considered, I don't actually think it's very clear which deck is better anymore. They're both very good, and Xiangping is obviously a much better player than I am. I will continue to try and pick up the Chaos pieces in Yu-Gi-Oh! From scratch because they're always worth experimenting with, but I would definitely like to open up a discussion on this topic. I do kind of need to finish optimizing the deck though before making a side-by-side comparison, so we'll work on that in the next episode. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. I do apologize for making you listen to my monotone voice for almost 19 minutes now. Don't worry, I'm going to wrap it up now so you can go feed your cat or empty the dishwasher or whatever you're waiting to do. I'm away on a camping trip with the girlfriend for the next couple of days, so the next episode of Yu-Gi-Oh! From Scratch will probably be on the weekend. See you then.
To slow down, fireplace, do you